Hello and welcome back to What's Mili Making, where I am Mili, and this is a space where I talk about the past, present, and future of my making, mostly knitting. Today's video is Knitting Podcast Episode 9. I am hoping to share Knitting Podcast Episode 10 for the end of the year, but we'll see how that goes. It has been more than a month since I have recorded a podcast, so I do have a lot of things to talk about, but my goal for this video is I think I will spend less time talking per project than usual because I have so much and I would like to get them all done by the end of the year, and I will presumably be talking about all of them in the next episode as well, which is probably a spoiler that I have no finished objects today. It is all about the whips, and I'm not doing a proper whip down, so to say, because I have some projects from like the spring and the summer, maybe in the beginning of the year, the winter, I don't know, but I cast on and I have not touched in months, and I'm really not thinking about those. But everything that I talk about in this video, ideally I will have finished by the end of the year. How successful that will be, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna try. So I guess without further ado, let's just jump into the works in progress, and I'll share my first one that is this close to being a finished object. And this is my Terrazzo sweater. I believe during my last podcast episode, I had just cast it on and I was working on the yoke, and as you can see, it is basically done. I had actually bound it off, but I didn't like the bind off. I was being lazy and I didn't want to do a sewn bind off after the torture of knitting all this fully twisted ribbing for the neckline. But then I regretted that decision and I ripped it out, and I just have this yarn to do the sewn bind off, which I will hopefully do this weekend. So this is the Terrazzo sweater by Petite Knit. It is a worsted weight sweater pattern, knit in the round, knit top down. It has, I've seen people call it an European sleeve, a European sleeve. I always thought of it as a contiguous sleeve. I'm unsure of the proper naming. It always confuses me. I've been showing you the back, I think. Nope, that's the front. Okay. So this sweater has an interesting construction where you do start off the yoke flat, but then you eventually join it in the round and you do these sleeve increases similar to how you would knit a raglan, except they sit closer to your body and there's not as large of a drop and as much positive ease as you would get with most raglan construction sweaters. This is my second time knitting this sweater. I really love the pattern. It's enjoyable to knit. It's interesting because you have different increase speeds at different sections of the yoke, and like I said, you have the part where you're knitting flat. It's not as, I don't want to call it a raglan boring, but some degrees, like if I was knitting like 5 raglans in a row, I would probably say, okay, these raglans are boring, but because this has a little bit more going on in the yoke, I would say it's a little bit more of an interesting project. And I really love the yarn combination that I knit in this. I knit this in, I am holding 2 yarns. One strand, the wool that I'm holding is Noro Silk Garden Sock Solo in the color TW, I want to say the number is 81. The name of the shade I'm pretty sure is Osaka, but either way, the name will be on the screen somewhere. And I also have it linked on my Ravelry project page for this project. And then I am holding it with a strand of hand-dyed silk mohair by Lili Loops. It was in this really pretty bubblegummy pink colorway. And the finishings, or like all the ribbing on the sweater, is half twisted rib, except for the neckline, which you do knit in fully twisted rib, because if you don't know, with half twisted rib, you are only twisting your knit stitches and you purl the purls as regular. And then when you look on the wrong side of half twisted rib, it just looks like regular ribbing because you didn't twist the purls. So on the wrong side, the knit stitches, which are the purl stitches on the right side, are in the correct orientation. However, because you are folding over the neckline, on the neckline you have to knit it as a fully twisted rib. Otherwise, when you fold it, the knit stitches will not be twisted. And knitting fully twisted rib was just really torturous for me. I didn't enjoy it at all, but I had specifically bought a fourth ball of yarn for this sweater because I did want the really long neckline on it. So I kind of like stubbornly pushed myself to just get on with it and knit the neckline extra long. I think I am about 4 inches shorter than what the pattern recommends, but I've tried this on and I'm happy with the way that it fits. I have a much shorter neck, so I think cutting off the 4 inches wasn't a deal breaker. I didn't like change the fit of the sweater or how it looked on me. One modification I did do is I realized that the first few, like up to the stitch marker, I put in a stitch marker. So like the first few inches of the ribbing, it's never going to be folded over. When you're wearing this sweater, you're never going to see that section. So up until this stitch marker, I just knit it as half twisted rib because, like I said, you're not going to see the wrong side. And then once I reached the stitch marker, I started knitting in fully twisted rib, and I left that stitch marker in just to ensure that whatever length I knit the neckline to, it was long enough to that when I folded it, it went over the spot where the stitch marker is, and it did. I don't know if I have anything else to say about this sweater. I am really excited to have it in my wardrobe and wear it. I think the only other modification I did is I think I probably knit the body shorter than the pattern says. But everything else, like I'm fairly certain I knit the sleeve ribbing and the body ribbing to whatever length Petite Knit suggested in the pattern. I will say, I feel like Petite Knit and the Scandi designers are known for having a lot of positive ease in their patterns, but the Terrazzo sweater is one of those that has way less positive ease than most of our other sweaters. I'm pretty sure it's written to have only like, I want to say like 4 to 6 inches of positive ease, or maybe 2 to 4. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's a lot less positive ease than usual. And when I knit my first version, I knit the neck much shorter, and I'm fairly certain I didn't even touch my fourth ball of yarn. Whereas in this sweater, I knit the whole thing minus the neckline with 2 skeins of Mohair and 3 balls of Noro, and then like I part way through the neckline, I forget at which point, I broke into my 3rd skein of Mohair and 4th ball of Noro. I'm fairly certain on my Ravelry product page, I put in the exact weight of yarn that I used up for this sweater. I totally see myself knitting a 3rd version of this. I actually have the exact shade of Noro that Petite I actually have the exact shade of Noro that Petite Knit used in her first sample, like the one that made it go super popular and why I wanted to knit it in the first place. I just have to buy the Mohair to knit it. So maybe that will be a 2025 product for me. And actually, I think this sweater was on my Make 9 for 2024, which I really did not follow through on at all, but we can talk about that in another video. I am happy to get to this one off my Make 9. But I'll talk about it again in the next episode because, as you can see, it is not a finished object. On Ravelry, I did mark it as finished object only because it was stressing me out how many whips I had. And yeah, technically I had bounded off at that point. So I'm just going to leave it because I don't want to see more whips on my Ravelry page. I just don't. Okay. That is one project that I talked about in my previous episode. I guess while we're on the topic of Petite Knit, let me talk about my other Petite Knit project. My next Petite Knit project is one that I have been working on forever, and it is the Ava cardigan. I've talked about this in so many podcasts, so I won't talk about it too much again. This is one that has a similar sleeve construction to the Terrazzo sweater. It has some sort of contiguous sleeve sweater construction, and it has a V-neck. The pattern is knit flat, so I followed the instructions for the yoke exactly as written, and then when it comes to join your front yoke to your back yoke, I just joined in the round in the middle, and I cast on 7 extra stitches, and I plan on steeking it. So as you might be able to tell, the section that I'm on right now is I'm knitting the button band. And I decided to modify the button band in this pattern because I didn't really love the look of the 2x2 rib button band on the sweater, also because the yarn that I'm using is quite woolly and textured. Even like in the 2x2 rib on the sleeves and the body, it's not the best looking because of the texture of the yarn. So I decided to modify the button band to be a vertical 1x1 rib button band. And I really am liking the way that it's looking. It has the same width as the 2x2 button band, 2x2 horizontal button band that is written in the pattern, but I like the look of this a little bit better. I think it's a little bit more seamless, and I'm following the instructions from a different pattern. It is the V-neck chokey. I forget the designer's name. It's the same designer who designed the Fayuhi sweater, I think. It's definitely a Japanese designer, but I will have the pattern name and the designer's name on the screen somewhere. Anywho, so I'm just following the instructions for the button band from that pattern because I tried looking for free instructions and I just wasn't finding anything that was clicking for me. So I was like, I might as well just buy this pattern. And their patterns are very, very descriptive, and I am not fully following it because the sweater pattern that I'm following the instruction for is also a V-neck, and they do something very interesting that at this V portion where like I am at right now, they actually work some short rows to make the button band sit nicer, and I have stopped here because I'm unsure if I want to do that or not. Also, I made a mistake where I accidentally started purling one of the stitches, and it's created like this weird ridge, and I have to go and ladder it back down with a crochet hook. I don't, you can probably wait. This first stitch is supposed to be a purl stitch, and that's why this ridge, it's supposed to be a knit stitch, sorry, and I've been knitting it as a purl stitch. That's why this ridge is so deep. I'm not sure how well it's coming across on camera, but I definitely notice it in real life. And yeah, basically I have to fix that with the crochet hook, and I've just been too lazy to do it, so it has been sitting on hold for the past week. My plan had been to knit 16 rows on this every day so I could finish it by the end of the month, but we'll see. Maybe this weekend I will force myself to just finish that mistake, because knitting 16 rows on this on the button band per day goes by so quickly. It was a very bite-sized, manageable amount, and I really do not want to take this into 2025 because it's been on the needle since May, and it's not a difficult knit. There was absolutely no reason for this to take me so long. I just got really bored with it, and over the time of me making this, I really got more into the crew neck cardigans. So yeah, I lost my motivation on this, but I would like to get it done this year because I do think it's something that I can very easily wear. Like, if anything, it'll be a great sweater to wear around the house. I guess I'll talk about the one last tip that I had from last episode, but I can't find part of it, so it'll be very brief. This is a bonnet I'm knitting with Woolfolk's anniversary yarn, and I forget where I was at the last point, but I don't think I finished the body of the bonnet. Currently, I am working on the strap of it, and I don't know where I put it. It's somewhere in a project bag. It's just moving a little bit slowly because it's a very few stitches, and I can't find my DPNs in that size, and I don't really want to buy. I'm like, do I want to spend $10 on a new set of DPNs when I already have DPNs and I literally use them maybe once a year? So I've stubbornly decided to just trudge through it on my circular needles. And yeah, it's not a difficult thing to knit. Like, I don't remember the number of stitches. Let's say it's like 7 stitches, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But it's just kind of slow because I don't have DPNs. This is another project I would like to finish by the end of the year because, again, it's such a simple thing to finish. There's no reason it should be taking me that long. And also, I really want to wear it because this yarn feels so nice and soft. And this is like without it even blocked. Apparently, it gets even softer with blocking. I just want to live out my Little Red Riding Hood cosplay. That is the last of my whips from last episode. I have 3 new whips because I decided the week of Thanksgiving that I would try to gift knit stuff for my family. Now, there is a 99.99999% chance that nobody from my family watches this podcast, but in case the YouTube algorithm has done some weird freak out and suggested this video to you, please stop watching. Go away. I don't want you to watch this. And anyway, so I've decided to knit 3 sweaters for my family, my mom, my dad, and my brother. And it kind of came to be because I have this one yarn. So I had 7 skeins of this piece fleece in the shade Volga Sippy Blue that I bought 2 years ago on my birthday to knit the Hannah sweater. Then last year, I think, I was flying to vacation. I think I was flying to California, and I cast on the Hannah sweater, and I absolutely hated it in this yarn. I didn't like the way that it was looking. The texture was looking weird, and I just let it go. So this yarn has basically been sitting in my stash for 2 years. I have no plans with it, and something about this yarn in particular was stressing me out. Like, I have a lot of yarn in my stash that I don't have concrete plans for, but it doesn't stress me out. But something about this freaking blue stressed me out. I think, one, the blue was different in real life than what I expected it to be. Number 2, I had quite a lot of it. I had 1,400 yards of worsted / Aran weight yarn. And I think number 3 is I have frequently wanted to buy other colors of piece fleece, but I've always been held back by the fact that I just had 7 skeins of it sitting in stash with no plans. So I decided to see if I could knit 2 sweaters out of this one quantity, out of this 7 skeins of yarn. And obviously, because I only give myself 1 month to knit 3 sweaters, not fully, but I'll get to that in a bit. Since I only gave myself 1 month to knit 3 sweaters, I was looking for sweaters with larger stitch gauges, and I did finally pick 3 different sweaters. So I will talk about the first one, which is a sweater that I feel like literally everybody is knitting at the moment. Did you guess what it is? It is the Lumme sweater by Sari Nordland, and I'm knitting this one for my mom. I am knitting it slightly off gauge because the piece fleece is listed as a worsted weight yarn. It's literally called piece fleece worsted, but it's so thick. I feel like it's more like an Aran, almost bulky weight yarn. So the main color for this sweater is the piece fleece in Volga Sippy Blue, and then I'm happy to say that all of the contrast colors I was able to pick from stash. So the white is some Patton's wool worsted. The pink is Sandiscarn Double Sunday, held with some leftover hand-dyed silk mohair from Lavender Fiber Co. The green is also Sandiscarn Double Sunday, held with a strand of green silk mohair and Surrey from Amano Yarns. Yes, those are all 3 of the contrast colors, and all of the contrast colors are from previous sweater projects, which I thought was really nice that I was able to make this sweater fully with yarn from stash. And it's funny, like I said, I really wasn't vibing with the way that this blue was looking in the skein, but then seeing it knit up in this colorwork project, I fell in love with the blue. I think it just looks so beautiful. And I'm definitely somebody who spends a lot of time contemplating and swatching and pulling out different yarns and looking online at different yarns and different colors before I start a colorwork project. But this, I literally went into stash, pulled some stuff out, and cast on immediately, and it was just a win from the get-go. So I really love the way that it looks. The pattern is very, very easy to knit. There are only a few rows where you're catching floats. There's no rows where you are knitting with 3 colors. So the pattern is technically written for 2 colors, but I really liked people's versions that use different colors in the yoke, so that's what I ended up doing. I also was unsure if I had enough of any single color to knit the entire yoke with just 1 contrast color. So necessity forced innovation. I also then did the colorwork on the sleeves, and I did something different in the sweater pattern. You can see this giant hole in the underarm. So I think I saw this in the Chronicles of Yarnia podcast. So when they were knitting a raglan sweater, what they did is, traditionally when you're knitting a raglan sweater, and the way that not raglan, and in this case circular yoke, traditionally what you would do when you are doing the sleeve is you would pick up the stitches from where you cast them on for the body, and you would knit the sleeve that way. But that often creates two holes on either side of the picked up stitches, and I just found that kind of annoying to go back and like zhuzhing with the fabric and pulling the yarn and all that stuff. So instead, what they recommended, and they saw this in a different pattern, you cast on stitches as well for the sleeve, and then once you're done, you just mattress stitch, or however you prefer to seam, the two sides together, and you have a clean underarm and just sturdier too. So I decided to give that a go. So far it's going well, and I presume that it will be very easy to stitch that hole up. I also forgot to mention, because my gauge was off, I knit this on much larger needles than what the pattern is written for, because this piece fleece was just not enjoyable on the smaller needles. So my stitch gauge is only slightly larger, but my row gauge was much larger. And I don't really like when circular yokes, like the yoke goes down to your elbows, and I didn't want that for my mom. So I ended up modifying the yoke. I had knitted as written initially, but the yoke depth was too much. So I ended up frogging, and this last white motif, I did it after the sleeve separation. And then when I knit the sleeves, I also did it on the sleeves, so that when you're wearing it, it looks like it's part of the yoke, but it's actually not. This sweater also has an interesting construction in that I feel like usually circular yoke and raglan sweaters, you usually do the short rows right after the neck ribbing. But in this sweater, you actually do it after you separate for sleeves, and it raises the back neck. There's also another set of short rows that you do towards the bottom of the sweater before you do the body ribbing, but I don't think I'm going to do that. And I asked on Instagram about this because a lot of people have knit this sweater before, and I also spent some time looking at people's projects on Ravelry, and I noticed the short row shaping before the ribbing, it does drop the back a little, and it does give it a slight high-low effect, and I liked the way that looked when the sweater was cropped and had a lot of positive ease around the hips. I think that gave it a good look. But then when people's sweaters were longer and they did that, sometimes it would give the sweater a different shape than the one I wanted. Through knitting this sweater and just looking at people's project pages, I came to some conclusions about what I like for circular yokes, because I always thought that circular yokes didn't look good on me. I haven't knit that many of them, but the ones that I did, I didn't love. And then I've seen a lot of circular yoke patterns where I didn't love the fit of them either. And I've come to realize there are certain details to the fit that make it a circular yoke I like or dislike. So I don't like when the yoke is too deep, but I also don't like it when it's too high. Like, it has to be the perfect medium. There has to be like some space in the underarm drop, but I don't like when it's too deep and it looks like a swan show. Another thing to take into account in terms of the fit is the amount of positive ease you have around the shoulders, as well as around the waist and the length of the body. Because I realized I always thought that circular yoke sweaters kind of reminded me of a mushroom, because I've seen so many of them where they're like very tight around the shoulders, and then the drop is low, but then the body is tight. So it just doesn't look like you have a lot of movement in a room for movement in your arms, and that wasn't a fit that I liked. But with this sweater, I realized when you have a proportionately shaped yoke that has ease around the shoulders and ease in the underarm without going too deep, as well as a decent amount of ease around the body and the hips, that gives a fit that I personally like. And I think that is kind of the fit that Sari has in her sample and pattern photos. So that was the goal for this sweater. Now, I did knit a size 1, but because my gauge was off, my finished object will be between a size 2 and 3, which is perfect for my mom. I did try the sweater on, and I have a much larger bust than her, so it will have a lot more positive ease on her. But even on me, when I wear the sweater, there's like no ease around the bust, but because I like the way that the shoulders fit and because there is ease around my waist area, I do like the way that this fits. I will say one thing is I noticed that a lot of people mentioned that they ended up using more yarn than the pattern recommends. So at first I thought that my yarn consumption was more because my gauge was much looser. Then I realized usually when your gauge is looser, you consume less yarn. So even though my gauge is looser, I am going to end up consuming more yarn than the pattern says. So that is something to keep in mind. I think I've seen people have the same problem with the book club cardigan. That's the name of it, right? I think because oftentimes with the Sari Norland patterns, they're only tested for the yoke and a sleeve. So maybe there's not as accurate information on the yardage, but I don't know. I am slightly afraid that the sleeve is too long because I was just knitting it, not thinking about it, not measuring anything, knitting the decreases as written, and then I was coming towards the last decrease and I was like, wait, the sleeve looks really, really long. So I did the last decreases much more rapidly, and I actually decreased way more stitches than the sweater says. Like by the end of the sleeve, I have decreased 15 more stitches than the pattern is written for. But like I said, my gauge was much looser than, or my gauge in the body was not that much looser, but somehow in the sleeve my gauge was much looser than the pattern. So I didn't want a ginormous sleeve that was not only long but super wide, so I ended up doing all those rapid decreases, and now I am happy with the circumference of the sleeve. I do think I'm just going to do a simple I-cord bind off on the sleeves. I just haven't decided which contrast color I want to use. I was thinking of doing the white, but then the white get really dirty very quickly. I could use the green. Yeah, I've knit the body, I think half a centimeter than is recommended, but because I'm not doing the short row shaping for the ribbing, I will be knitting this body a bit longer. Also, my mom doesn't really like cropped sweaters. So yeah, that is the progress on this. Apologies if today what I'm saying is like a little bit more haphazard than usual. I usually take notes before I record these podcasts, so I have like a chronological way of going through the notes on each project, but I didn't have time to do that today, so I'm just speaking from memory. But hopefully I got all the information out that I wanted, and hopefully it was comprehensive. But either way, I will be talking about this project again. So that is my mom's sweater. This sweater was not going to take up 1,400 yards of the piece fleece, so I also cast on my dad's sweater with it. So for my dad, I have cast on the Joha loop sweater by Other Loops. If you watched my Advent video, you may have seen me talk about the Johanna, I think that's the name of it, Johanna loop sweater by Other Loops, which is very similar. It uses the same like color work motif. However, that one is a drop shoulder pattern and the color work is all throughout the body, whereas this is a raglan pattern and the color work is only in the yoke. The body is just knit in stockinette stitch. So I did the same modification as I did with my mom's Lumme, where I did not cast on with the ribbing. I don't think I forgot to mention that. But basically, the Lumme does start off with casting the neckline, but I never prefer to do that. I prefer to pick up stitches for the neckline later on because I find it just gives a more stable fabric. Also, I'm unsure of what color I want to do the neckline on my mom's Lumme because I think I'm going to knit it in blue and then switch colors and fold it over so that the inside of the neckline is not the piece fleece, which is kind of scratchy. I think I'm going to probably do something similar for my dad's sweater. So yeah, this is the Joha loop sweater. I'm done with most of the color work. I think I have one more section of this motif. This is my second time casting this on because the first time I cast it on with some green yarn that I'll talk about in my acquisitions because I bought it for the sweater. This pattern has been it's been pretty straightforward, pretty easy to knit. I think I did have some minor complaints about the chart. One, The chart is knit in black and white, and it's like 2 shades of gray. It's like a medium dark gray and a medium light gray. And I don't know, I feel like on my eyes it was just a little bit difficult to see. Like, you can make a black and white chart. They could have just used black and white, or like a very light gray and a black. I don't know. The color choice of using 2 medium shades of gray was just kind of weird to me. I guess that's how they knit their sample, but I don't know. As a color work chart, I found that to be not very easy on the eyes. And then another thing is that there is a chart. This is my mistake. This is not the designer's mistake. There is a very simple chart for the raglan increases. Like, I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying it's just like one color, 2 colors on the outer stitches, and then 1 color on the center stitch, so you can literally see it. But that chart is on a different page than the chart for the color work. And in the instructions, I wish they had said like, oh, don't forget the chart for the raglan stitches or something like that, because I admittedly, like I said, this is my fault. I wish they had the reminder, but at the end of the day, it is my fault. I admittedly don't necessarily read like the chunk of text that's in the beginning of the pattern. I will usually like look at the gauge, the needle size, and just jump to where it starts. And that was my mistake, because they did have this in like the section where they're say like, what is make one left? What is SSK? Like that kind of stuff that I already know, so I tend to skip over that. But because I cast this on once and started knitting it, I realized that mistake when I was looking at the project, so it wasn't matching up with the pattern photos. And then my only other complaint I had with the chart is, so the chart is written in a way where you have the body stitches, and then in the center of the chart, certain stitches are pointed out for being sleeve stitches. So when you are knitting the body sections, you are knitting from start to beginning, and then when you're knitting the sleeve, you're only knitting those middle sections. But you also have increases on the sleeves. So if you were to knit the body section, presumably those increases on the sleeves would also be worked on the body, but then when I did the math, that would throw off the stitch count. So I wish they said somewhere in the chart that, oh, only work these increases on the sleeve, don't work with them in the body. Like, maybe make them a different color or something, just to indicate, to make it clear to the knitter, like, you don't knit those on the body. Again, maybe that's like something standard that I'm not familiar with, but I just thought I would point that out in case anybody wants to knit this pattern and didn't know that. And this, I'm pretty sure, was not nowhere written in the pattern, because after I ripped out my first version and I was trying to figure out what mistake I did with the raglan, I did end up going back and reading the chunk of text that's in the beginning of the pattern. All those are pretty minor complaints. Otherwise, this has been pretty smooth sailing. I wanted to finish the yoke last night, but I ran out of the blue yarn and I just didn't feel like winding it last night, so I wound it up this morning, and I will finish this tonight. I do think I will end up having to buy an extra skein of piece fleece to finish both my parents' sweater. As long as I can finish up the majority of that skein, I will be happy. And last time I checked, Brooklyn General Store did have some in stock, so I'm hoping to go there this weekend and purchase some. I will say I'm really not enjoying the piece fleece at all. I'm kind of happy that every time I've been tempted to purchase some, I didn't, because it's such an unpleasant knitting experience for me. I thought the reason that I didn't enjoy the Hannah sweater is because I didn't like the way that the cables were looking, but I just don't enjoy knitting with it. It doesn't feel nice on my needles. And it's not because it's a woolly wool, because I love woolly wools. It's like, it almost reminds me of like knitting with cotton or like a boucle, where it just doesn't have enough elasticity or something. It feels like it's straining my hands when I'm knitting it. And I thought it was just me, but I went on the comments under, like when you look up a yarn on Ravelry, there's a comments tab. And when I looked under there, I did see some other people also struggling with knitting this yarn. And some people mentioned perhaps it's the way it's spun or applied. I don't know, but either way, like, what's that mean? Like, I'm straight up not having a good time. That is me with this piece fleece, and I'm going to be so happy when I get these gift knits done, purely because I do not enjoy working with the piece fleece, which is a shame because I love the way that the projects are working up, and I also love the ethos behind the piece fleece brand because all the yarn is grown in the US. It's domestic wool, and I'm pretty sure the mohair in the yarn comes from animals grown by the Navajo Nation. It's milled in the US. Like, it's all a very domestic and local process, which of course I want to support. And also the pricing is very reasonable. When I bought this 2 years ago, I'm pretty sure I paid $14 per skein, and currently it's like $18 per skein. But I think for like a domestically grown and milled yarn in the US, like, that's very reasonably priced in my opinion. So I would love to support it, but yeah, I'm just like not enjoying it. And I thought maybe like the batch that I got was poorly spun or something, but I actually got it from two different dye lots, and one of the dye lots that I got was very, very old because the yarn smelled terrible. Like, I had to wash it with like a scouring wool wash twice to get like the really, really heavy lanolin stink out of it. So yeah, that is the saga of the Peace Fleece. I will say though that the dye lots are very, very consistent. The yoke of my mom's Lumme sweater is knit in that really, really old dye lot that I had to wash twice. But then the sleeves and the body are knit in the new dye lot. And hopefully I'm not jinxing myself, but I really can't tell a difference between the dye lots. So those are two sweaters. Let's get to the last sweater, which I think I have some pictures of it before I frogged it, but I've decided to knit the White Mountain sweater by Midori Hirose for my brother, except I frogged most of, oh no, the mohair. I frogged most of the progress that I made. This is all that I have left because I am undecided about the colors. I decided that I wanted to make my family matching sweaters, and because I did have more light blue yarn stash, I thought, why not use this light blue yarn? This is a really, really nice wool. This is Jill Draper Ansel, which is another US milled and grown yarn. It is from New York State, so super local. And it is a sport weight non-super washable, and it feels a really, really soft. And so I looked to the White Mountain sweater, which is knit on 6mm needles with a 14 stitch gauge. So I was holding 2 strands of mohair and 1 strand of the fingering weight wool. My initial plan had been to fade from the green to this blue, but when I cast it on, like, the neon green was just like looking like way, way, way too much. I wasn't vibing with it. But I think I can get it done. I think I'm going to recast it on tonight. Here is my big bag of wool. So I have that Jill Draper wool, and then I have this blue Isagar mohair. I have 5 balls of that, so more than enough of that. Then I have 1 ball of the Farmer's Daughter's fiber mohair in a light blue that's like identical to the Jill Draper. And then I have 2 skeins of this neon green. What I'm thinking of doing instead is holding 1 strand of the neon green, 1 strand of the light blue mohair, and 1 strand of the wool, and then fading that down to holding 1 strand of the green with 1 strand of the blue. Because I do really like the way that the neon green looks, but I think holding 2 strands of it was just overwhelming. Alternatively, if I wanted to be even more muted, I might do some helical knitting where 1 row is green, blue, blue, and 1 row is just all 3 blues. But we'll see. I haven't decided 100% yet. I keep waffling back and forth what I want to do with it. I will say one minor annoyance I had is it's so difficult to find men's knitting patterns on Ravelry because I do not think that clothing is inherently gendered and anybody can wear anything. However, the reality is people who are looking for a male or masculine fit sweater are looking for a sweater. What am I trying to say? Basically, I wish if designers are going to tag their sweaters as male, can you please show a male presenting person wearing the sweater so that I know, like, okay, this sweater will fit a male body? Because like I said, clothing is not inherently gendered, but clothing created for women and clothing created for men, or like female presenting people and male presenting people, typically have different proportions. Like, sweaters meant for male bodies tend to have broader shoulders and longer yokes, and if you are going to sell a pattern and tag it as male, like, I feel like it's like the bare minimum to ask that a male presenting person is showing wearing the sweater. So that was my annoyance. And then I couldn't find any sweater pattern that I liked that was strictly like a male pattern. So I ended up just looking at raglan sweater patterns because they are pretty generic. And I do remember the White Mountain sweater, a knitting YouTuber that I follow, Jonathan Days. He did knit the sweater a few years ago. So I went back and I watched his video, and he didn't mention making any modifications, so it was fine. I did end up trying to find a pattern that had a schematic for a male raglan sweater pattern, but again, I couldn't really find that. I feel like most designers, when they include a schematic for their sweater, it's only available after you purchase the pattern. So yeah, there's like a lot of guessing going on, basically. I did find one sweater pattern by, I think, Natasha Hornby. It was, I want to say like Lord Byron or something. It was a male sweater. It was a raglan. However, that sweater had some of the issues I was talking about with the Lumme, where when it's kind of tight around the shoulders and tight around the body, it looked like that sweater seemed like the raglan was a little bit deep, but it was very tight. So it wasn't the fit that I was looking for, but it gave me an idea of how deep raglans look on male bodies. I don't know. I am hoping the sweater fits. We'll see what happens. At least for my dad, I knit him the Celeste man sweater last year, and I still have that with me because I had to fix something for him on it. So I can compare the sizing to that. But for my brother, I don't really have any idea of what size to make for him. So it's a little bit of a guessing game. But I'm sure it will all work out in the end. And my goal is not necessarily to finish all the sweaters by Christmas. Like in an ideal world, I would. Like the Lumme, I think I could. The other two, unsure. The goal is to finish one sleeve and the body. I don't have to necessarily have the ribbing done, but as long as I have the stockinette section of the body, so I know that the length is correct, I can finish the ribbing and the second sleeve of the sweater relatively quickly. And that's just giving me like a little bit more breathing room in getting these sweaters done. But then like when I think about it, if I finish the yoke of my dad's sweater tonight, which I will, and I think tomorrow I've knit the White Mountains yoke. When I was knitting it the first time around, this is actually my third cast on because I kept making mistakes. So that yoke moves very, very quickly, and because I know what I'm doing this time, like I know the modifications that I made, and I have an idea of how I'm going to be holding the yarns, it should move quicker. So I'm assuming that I can get that yoke done tomorrow and get started on the body. It's Saturday and I don't have any other plans. No, I have some plans, but I'll have a significant amount of knitting time tomorrow. I think by the end of the weekend, my goal will be to have both of the yolks done and get started on both of the sleeves. That seems like a reasonable goal to me. The sleeves really shouldn't take that long because they're knit on 6mm needles. We'll see what happens in the next episode. Okay, wow, that was a lot of talking, but I'm so glad that I got through all those works in progress. And I technically did have a sewing finished object, but I'm going to maybe talk about that in the next episode or the next episode. We'll see what happens. But we can talk about acquisitions because I do have some acquisitions. First up, let me talk about my yarn advent, which has been sitting in the background. I bought the Through the Wardrobe Yarn Co.'s Narnia inspired advent on the non-superwash fingering weight base this year. It's so dreamy. It's so dreamy. It's like a pastel dream. I love it so much. It is a different vibe than what I was expecting, but it's so pretty. Like it's just like a pastel dream. Because I remember when this collection was coming out, the pre-order for this was coming out, they were doing their Bridgerton collection, which also has like a very similar pastel-y vibe. So yeah, this is so pretty. I am unsure of what I want to knit with this. I think I initially said like the Polyrhythm and the Johan loop sweater were at the top of my list, but I don't know how they will look with this color palette. So I am thinking of doing a self-drafted cardigan. And it will be, I really like the patchwork sweaters, but there's not one that does exactly what I want. So I'm thinking of knitting, suspend your disbelief that I'm willingly wanting to do this, a bottom up intarsia seamed cardigan that will have checkerboards, and then some of the checkerboards will have some intarsia motifs on them, like bows or stars, or just like very simple shapes. And like I envision it in my mind inspired by this Lisa Says Ga sweater, but we'll see. I think my checkerboards would have to be smaller because I would like to use all 24 colors, and yeah, we'll see. I think my contrast color though still will be a darker brown because so far I think all these colors would look good with dark brown. It's so cute and pretty. Being like the names every day and like just having a little guessing game with myself with what the color would be. And I found my childhood copy of the Chronicles of Narnia, and I've started rereading the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Oh look, it's a little map of Narnia. I also have some yarn acquisitions from Black Friday. I wasn't planning on purchasing any yarn, but then there is a store called Mother Knitter here in New Jersey, and they are like the Sanduskarn flagship store for the US. They carry like every single base and every single color, and they had a bunch of Sanduskarn off for 50%. They had a bunch of Sanduskarn yarn for 50% off for Black Friday through Cyber Monday, and it was all shades of pink and green inspired by Wicked. And if you're not from the US, you probably don't know this, but Sanduskarn yarn is like really upmarked in the US. Like purchasing it from a European retailer versus purchasing it in the US is usually anywhere from like 2 to 3 times the price. So we pay a lot of upcharges on the Sanduskarn yarn prices. So when I saw it for 50% off, I couldn't resist getting some. I got a sweater quantity of 1 pink yarn. Let me talk about that first. So I got a sweater quantity of Pure Gint in the color 4626. I want to say it's shocking pink, but I don't remember off the top of my head. Pure Gint is a rusticy Norwegian wool, but I like the way that it feels. Actually, I think they changed it. Okay, never mind. It is 100% Norwegian wool. I think I saw online somewhere that they changed it to have some Peruvian wool in it too, but this one is 100% Norwegian wool. Maybe I'm thinking of a different yarn. I don't know. Anyways, I bought a sweater quantity of this. I am unsure about what I'm going to make with it. I was thinking maybe an Amy sweater, maybe a Dagmar jacket, because I have 16 balls of it. And I feel like when I see like European people talk about Pure Gint, they're like, or like British people talk about it, I'm like, they're like, oh, it's only like 4 pounds or like 3 pounds or whatever. Here, 1 ball of Pure Gint is $8. Like even when I think I bought some tin Pure Gint off Garntopia at some point, and I'm pretty sure it was $4 or less from there. So yeah, the upcharging is a lot. It's literally cheaper to buy Sanduskarn for the most part from Canadian retailers and pay for shipping to the US. I've never done that. I always just ended up buying it from like a local store, but it is cheaper to do that for now. Another reason why I purchased this is because I don't really know what's going to happen come January, and we're in the middle of a trade war or whatever. Who knows what's going to happen to the price of everything, including yarn. So that's how I also justified this purchase. So I did do a pickup in store order. Oh, let me talk about the one other yarn I purchased during the Black Friday sale. I also purchased 4 balls of this alpaca wool in the colorway 8733. So initially I purchased this because I used a very, very similar shade of light green in Double Sunday as a contrast color in my mom's Lumme sweater. So I thought if I was making matching sweaters for my mom and dad, I would get the alpaca wool, which is a worsted weight yarn. I thought I would get the alpaca wool, which is a worsted weight yarn, in a very similar shade of green and make my dad's sweater. But when I cast it on, the Joha loop sweater, I just didn't like the way it was looking. It was looking kind of like a Buzz Lightyear sweater, and that was not the vibe I was going for. I also accidentally purchased 4 balls of these instead of 2 balls, but because there was that 50% off sale, it was basically like I paid the price of buying 2 balls, so it wasn't the end of the world. So those were my Black Friday purchases. And then since I didn't want to pay for shipping, like the store is a little bit over an hour away and I had time in my schedule to go on weekend, I just did the pickup in store option. Also, I wanted to see some of the Sanduskarn yarns in person. One of the sweater patterns in my Make 9 for this year was the Haraboji cardigan by Knit, and I have been kind of like on and off about whether I've been wanting to knit it or not, but I'm back on it. I would like to cast it on. Maybe it can be like my New Year's cast on, I don't know. But I've been wanting to knit it with this Noro Hanui silk wool, which is super, super soft. It is a single ply yarn. And I knit my other Egyo knit sweater, the Yura sweater, with the Hanui wool. And while that sweater is beautiful, it is prone to pilling because it is a single ply yarn. So I thought of holding this with another yarn. I didn't really want to hold it with Mohair. I remembered that Sandus Garn has this alpaca Folgatron, which is a lace weight 100% alpaca yarn with 50 grams equals 400 meters. So my plan had been to just take this with me in store and then find a color match for it, and then when I was ready to cast on, I would just purchase the yarn online because I have a Wool Company gift card and I thought I would just do that. But they didn't have the two colors I was interested in on the floor, so I asked the sales associate if they had it, and then she brought it up from the basement, and then I felt bad making somebody like bring up something for me to see and then I didn't even end up purchasing it. So I just ended up buying one ball of the alpaca lace weight yarn, and it is a really nice color match for this. I'm fairly certain this is a color marzipan. So I will finally be knitting with the famous marzipan color from Sandus Garn. So that is my acquisition. Actually, right before I started filming, I got a notification that I had a package from Mother Knitter delivered. And I have a feeling they accidentally sent me the yarn twice, or they thought maybe I didn't pick it up in the store, so they mailed it. Let's see what's in this bag. Oh my god. Yes, that does seem to be the case. I will have to email them because I checked my credit card and they didn't charge me for this twice. This is just another 20 balls of yarn. Yeah, I will have to email them and be like, hey, I think you sent me extra yarn that I did not pay for. What do I do with it? Maybe they'll just like email me a return label or something to send it back. But if I got to keep it, I wouldn't be mad. Then I would have 8 balls of this, and I could definitely knit something. I can knit a scarf with 8 balls, and then I would have 2 sweater quantities of this pink. It's quite a bright pink, but I do like it a lot. Anywho, that is the end of the acquisitions. I have no idea how successful I was in making this a quick video, but hopefully I was able to keep it under an hour long. And I always keep saying I'm going to talk about like media consumption at the end of the podcast, but by the time the end comes, I feel like I'm so over talking for so long and I'm like stressed about it being too long, but I'll just share this very quickly. I have been listening to a lot of audiobooks lately because I've been on like the wait list for months through my library, and then they just all come in at the same time. So let's see what I've been listening to. I started the Lightlark series, which it starts off very, very slow, but then by the end of the first book, I was interested. I also did not realize it was a series when I first started it. I don't even remember why I put it on hold. I probably got like an ad or something for it on Instagram. And while I was like in the middle of the book, I already knew. I was like, this is going to be another one of those YA books that is not a standalone. They're going to turn it into a series. And what do you know? There are apparently already 3 books out, and I am currently on book number 2. It is mildly more interesting, but I'm also just getting like really frustrated with the main character. I'm like, why are you being such a dumb bee? You're so annoying. But yeah, that's what I've been listening to. I feel like I've read a lot of other books, but they're like completely blanking from my mind. Yeah. So I guess I will wrap up this video. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. And as always, please feel free to share what you are working on while watching this video because I'm nosy and I love to know what's on other people's needles. Oh, I forgot to say, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a like and follow along to see more videos. I am unsure what the next video will be. I have like ideas for some like end of the year wrap up type videos, but those may end up being shared in January. I'm unsure. I want to do a video on my most worn knits of the year, maybe revisiting my make 9 of the year, maybe looking at my yarn purchases. I don't really know if I want to share that though. My yarn purchases and like my yarn spreadsheet for the year. That video I'm like 50-50 on. But I really would love to have one last podcast before the end of the year. We'll see what happens though. Anyways, that's the end. Thank you so much for watching. Happy holidays, happy knitting, and hope to see you again next time. Bye!